Hi, I'm Tracy Ackerman, the designer and creator at KeLibu. I make patterns, costumes, and accessories for 14 to 20-inch dolls. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you always know when I post new content. In this series, we're going to be making steampunk wings for our dolls. Because this is a fairly involved project, I've split it into several videos. In today's video, we're going to be making the wing blades for our steampunk wings. In my blog post, I will have a list of all of the materials and tools required for the entire project. And in each video, I'll go over the specific ones that are needed for that video. Let's get creating. Let's talk about what you're going to need for this project. The first thing is you're going to need the pattern. If you're a newsletter subscriber, this is already available on the download page for you. If you're not yet a subscriber, I'll put a link in the description below where you can sign up and then you'll have access to it. You can either print it out on copy paper and trace around the pieces, or you could print it out onto cardstock and cut the pieces out and glue them together. For each wing blade and tip, you are going to need 4 pieces, 2 oriented the way they are on the pattern page and 2 reversed. There's also SVG files. If you have an electronic die cutter or a laser cutter, you can cut them out that way. I chose to cut my pieces out of manila tag. This is similar to what file folders are made out of. I happen to have a very large roll of this that I use for human size pattern making, so I just cut smaller pieces off. It's a little bit sturdier than 65-pound cardstock, probably akin to 110-pound cardstock. You're also going to need a piece of black cardstock, and what we're going to be using that for is to make these little faux rivets here. I just applied some gold rub and buff to the cardstock and punched it out with my Crop-A-Dial. If you don't want to do that, because you do have to punch out quite a few of these, you could, if you can find small enough nail heads, glue those on instead. You are also going to need some wood look contact paper. I got this from Dollarama, but I know that it's available in several stores like Walmart, and you can order it on Amazon. So just pick one that has a wood grain look that you like. You're going to need some leather. I chose to use 2 different colors of leather, one for the top of the big wing blade and one to attach all the wing blades together, but you don't have to do that. You can use the same color for both if you like. I'm going to be using some black acrylic craft paint to dry brush onto my wing blades just to age them a little bit and make them look a little more realistic. And I'm going to be using rub and buff in gold leaf for the fake rivets that are on the wing tips. For glue, I'm going to be using LePage Ultra Gel because I have a really hard time getting my hands on Loctite here where I live in Canada. And for some things, I am going to be using Aleene's Tacky Glue. You can use any sort of white PVA glue for those pieces. For hardware, you're going to need 10 of these smaller rivets. They're 4mm cap size and 4mm post size. I ordered those on Amazon. You're also going to need 6 pinch bails. Now, when you're looking for bails, you want to make sure that if you're choosing a style like this, that the top loop is actually welded on. So some of them have loops that will flop around. You don't want that. And you also need to make sure that once you apply it to the top of your wing, which would sit like this, you're going to have a loop with which to pass the cord through. So this is one option that I found locally. And this is another option that I found. It's a little more ornate, a little more heavy duty. Also a pinch bail. and I got these off Etsy, so I will put a link in the description if you would like to order this kind. You need 6 of whatever style you choose. Lastly, I want to go over the tools I'm going to be using. I will be using my Crocodile, the 1/8 inch punch. I'm going to be using an old gift card to help me spread the glue on my wing pieces. A pencil would be helpful for tracing, or dark ink pen. You also may need a chalk pen if your leather pieces are dark so that you can mark hole placement. I'm going to be using pliers to close my pinch bails. I'm going to be using a rivet setter and hammer to set my rivets. I'm going to be using an awl to make the holes in my leather pieces to connect the wings. I'm going to be using a paintbrush to dry brush on my black acrylic craft paint when I'm aging it. And I'm just going to be using a utility knife to cut certain pieces, like when I put the shelf contact paper down on my wingtips, I will just trim it up near the wingtip with this utility knife. The first thing you need to do is cut out all your wing pieces. I did all mine on the laser cutter, which is why they're marked so I didn't get mixed up when I was trying to assemble everything. So here I've got 2 number 2 pieces. What I'm going to do is just spread my Aleene's tacky glue onto the back here. Try and get it kind of all over. And then I will take my old gift card and use it to spread the glue and get it out to the edges. If you don't want to get glue on your mat, you may want to lay something down underneath it before you do this. And then I'm going to line my pieces up. And because the glue stays tacky for a while, if you need to slide them around a bit to get them to line up properly, you can do that. And then I'm just going to take and push down and use the side of my card that didn't have glue kind of as a brayer to make sure these pieces are good and adhered. And then I'm going to take my wingtip pieces, glue those on as well. Because my paper tends to have a natural curl to it because it is on a roll, once I get my pieces all glued, I'm going to take them and put them under a heavy book so that they become nice and flat as that glue is setting up. One tip on there, I'm going to put the other one on the other side and just make sure I know which way it's going before I apply the glue. Okay. And again, I'm just going to use the other edge of my card to really press that down. So go ahead and do this for all of your pieces. Once you're done gluing them all together, you should have 2 of each size, and let those dry and let the glue set for a couple hours, and then you're ready to move on to the next step. My contact paper has these dark lines going down it to make it look like strips of hardwood, but it doesn't make it easy to cut sections. So what I've done is cut off a little section. I only have to get the contact paper up to the edge of this wing tip, so that's why I didn't cut one off that's as long as the wing blade. Then what I did was I turned it over and traced my piece on here. Now, it wasn't quite wide enough for me to trace the other side of this number 2 piece, so I took one of my other wing blades, number 3, and flipped it over there. So I'm going to cut this out, and then we'll apply it to the front of our wing blade. I've cut my piece out. Now I'm just going to peel the backing off. And line it up. If you find it easier, you could also just stick a big piece down over top and cut around your shape. I'm going to just use my fingernail to crease the edge of where this wingtip is, and using a sharp utility blade, carefully slice along that edge. The contact paper should peel it fairly easily. And there you go. So you just have to go and cover both sides of each wing blade in a similar fashion, and then I'll show you what we're going to do with these wingtips. I've measured how big a piece of copper tape we're going to need for each of our wingtips. So for your number one wing, you're going to need a piece that, well, two pieces that are 3 1/8 inches long. For your number two wingtips, you're going to need two pieces that are 2 3/4 inches long. Number 3, also 2 3/4 inches long. Number 4, 2 3/8 inches long. And number 5, 2 1/2 inches long. And then what we're going to do is take these pieces and fold them in half and just cut up the center, because we're going to be using these edges that we know are straight on the edge of the tape to go along this straight edge here. I've cut my pieces in half. I'm now just going to carefully peel the backing off the tape, and using the edge that I know was the straight edge, I'm going to lay it along this edge. Now what you need to do is make sure that you're getting this tip covered. And smooth it in place. For the first piece, I cut a little bit of extra width so that I can wrap it around this edge here to hide it. The tape is pretty malleable, so you should be able to wrap it fairly easily, and just smooth out lumps and bumps, and then flip it over to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing over here. Line the factory cut edge up with the edge of your wingtip. And now I'm going to cut this edge fairly close to the wing blade. And just smooth it down. There we go. So you just have to repeat that for every wingtip, and if you are not using the copper tape, go ahead and paint those, and then we're going to make and attach our fake rivets. Once you have all of the copper on your wingtips, it's time to make our fake rivets. I'm just going to be applying some of my gold leaf rub and buff to this black cardstock. I need to cut 100 little fake rivets, so I'm going to cover some additional area here so I have enough room to punch those out. Make sure you squeeze your tube a little bit to reincorporate the oil and the wax paste that's inside, and then just start coloring. As you can see, I used a different color of gold before. I think it was antique gold, but this time I'm using gold leaf. And if you don't want to get it all over your fingers, which I would recommend, use a glove, or you can use a sponge or something to smooth this all on the paper, and that should be more than enough surface area to punch out 100 fake rivets. So I'm going to let this set up for a little bit and take a cloth and just rub it to make sure it's all set, and then I'm going to use my Crop-A-Dile, the 1/8 inch punch, and punch out 100 of these. Before we put our rivets on, we are going to do some aging. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of a black acrylic craft paint, wipe most of it off on this paper towel, and then kind of dry brush it on here, and then immediately wipe most of it off. So it ends up just creating a little bit of almost dirty or weathered look, and I'm gonna do it on the copper part too. So you can see this side looks a little bit more worn and used than my bright shiny side. So I'm just going to continue to do that for all of my wing blades. Give them a bit of a weathered look. It just helps them look a bit more realistic. So go ahead, do that, and then give them a little bit of time to dry. It shouldn't take long since you are dry brushing the paint on. And then we will go ahead and apply our fake rivets. I'm going to be using a very technical tool I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video. Toothpick. I'll be getting a dab of glue on the end, using it to pick up one of my faux rivets here. And after smearing the glue around on the back a little bit, I'll be laying the rivets down. The nice thing about using the white glue is that if you don't like where you've placed your rivet, you have a little bit of time to move it around. My preference is, since I know that I'm putting down 5 rivets, I put the 2 end ones first, and then the one in the middle, and then finally the last 2 to try and get a visually even spacing. Much like that. And then once you have one side done, you're going to have to flip your wing blade over and do that on the other side as well. And you need to do that for all 10 of your wing blades. I've finished gluing on all my faux rivets, and the next stage is to cut some leather for these little strips that are going to go on the top of our #1 wing blades. That's just going to provide a little bit more width and stability for us to attach our pinch bails to the top of those. My preference is to simply cut a 1/4 inch wide strip using my ruler and my rotary cutter, as these little pattern pieces are 1/4 inch wide, and then cut them down to size. So if you can do it that way, or you can just trace around the pattern piece and cut it out of the leather. I've already cut a couple of strips, so I'm just going to lay my pattern piece down on the strip and, using it as a guide, chop it off. And because the end is a 45-degree angle, it makes it really easy. Once I've done one cut, I just flip this piece around, and then all I have to do is cut the piece down to size. Once you've got your pieces cut, you're going to need 2 of this one and 2 of the other one that faces the other way. You're going to want to take your chalk pencil, if you have dark leather like I do, or a dark pen if your leather is lighter. Make your marks and then use your punch to punch out the holes at those marks. Once you have those leather pieces cut, you're going to need to mark your holes on piece #1. So just using your pattern piece and a pencil or a pen, mark your holes. So those are for where the leather strip is going to go. And then I'm also going to mark my holes that I'm going to punch for where the wings are going to get attached to the frame and where we're going to attach the wing blade pieces to each other. So go ahead and mark both #1 pieces. Now that my holes are punched, I'm just going to apply some of my glue sparingly to this piece here. Basically, you want good coverage, but you don't want so much that it's gonna come oozing out the sides. And then you lay your leather piece down, matching up the holes. So, and I think I need to add a little bit more on the end here. Okay, whoops. Now I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing on the other side. All right. Now I'm going to set these aside to dry and set up for a few minutes after I do the other one, of course, and then we're going to attach our pinch bails. Give them the glue time to set, and now I'm going to be attaching my pinch bails on the top here. As you can see, there is only the tiniest little opening on these, so I'm going to use my jewelry pliers to just open them up a bit. Depending on what style you get, you may need to do the same. And then I'm going to, again, use my super glue because I want a really good, tight bond, and squeeze a little bit into each side of the hole. Once I've got my glue in, I'm going to put my bail in place, and then I'm going to use my bigger pliers to close these up. Okay, filming the first one didn't go so smoothly, so I've put my super glue into the holes and I've slipped my bail into place, and then I'm just going to use my big pliers to gently squeeze. Now, because this design is already textured, the pliers aren't actually flattening it or anything like that, and I'm just squeezing until I can feel those two ends meet in the middle in the hole. So I'm going to do that for this last one, and then I'm going to do it for the other wing blade, and I'm going to set those aside for the glue to set up. The next step is to take our pattern pieces and mark the holes that we need to for attaching our wings to our rig, and also attaching the wing blade pieces together. So just use a pencil or a pen and mark all those holes and punch them all, and then we're going to cut some leather. Alright, I've cut 2 strips of leather that are 1/4 inch wide. You need 4 strips for each side of your wings that are 1/4 inch wide and 1 1/4 inches long. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my ruler and my rotary cutter to cut those 8 pieces, and then I'm going to punch holes in the ends. We're on the last step for getting these wings ready to go. Initially I thought that I was just going to use my awl to poke holes in these little straps, but I changed my mind and decided to punch holes instead. I'm going to be using my little rivets here. I don't know if you can see, but this is the post side, and then this is the cap side, and they actually look the same on both ends. So I'm going to take my post side and bring it up through the back of wing number 1. Put my little piece of leather on and pop the cap on. Now I'm going to go ahead and set this rivet, and I'm not going to do it on camera because it's awkward and loud. Alright, now that that's set, this is where things get a little more hairy because we're doing multiple layers. So you want to lay your post down first, slip the piece of leather that's attached to number 1 over top, then wing piece number 2, then a second leather strip, and lastly your cap. And then go ahead and set that. All right, once again, place your post down, slip the bottom piece of leather for number 2, then wing blade number 3, another piece of leather, and your cap, and set that. Okay, let's attach number 4. So post down, leather over top, wing blade number 4, last strip of leather for this side, and a cap. Alright, last one. Post down, leather, wing blade, cap, and go ahead and set that, and then we'll get these little leather straps all arranged. I find the easiest way to arrange these little bits is to attach all the wing blades together at their holes like they are going to be when they are seated in our apparatus. So I'm just using a big brad to hold them together. You could use a twist tie if you don't have a brad, but that just sort of keeps it in place. And then what you want to do is spread your wings out, and as you can see, these are kinking a little bit funny just because I had the blades kind of sitting one right over top of the other when I was doing this, but you just gotta twist them a little bit, play around with them until you like the way that they're laying, and then you can set that aside and work on the other side, and then we will pick up with the rest of the construction of these steampunk wings in the next video. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Steampunk Wings series. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you're not already subscribed to the KeLibu newsletter, I'll provide a link in the description below where you can do so. Newsletter subscribers get access to all my free patterns. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell so you know when I post the next video in this series. Thanks for watching, everyone.